All right. I did drop into the chat the link to our website, which has all the materials we're going to be reviewing today in this informational webinar, including the request for proposals and the application template. So I just wanted to start our informational meeting today saying that this AgCWIP program has been a really important part of our state strategies in achieving our clean water goals. And that's partnership amongst watershed groups, farmer groups, our conservation districts, UVM Extension, all of these organizations that provide services to the agricultural community are a really important part of getting the work done, you know, the boots on the ground and moving us as a state towards achieving our water quality goals. And I wanted to share just a quick couple pieces of statistics, I guess you could say, just from the last couple of years that we've had this program. So the AgCWIP program's been going on since 2017, 2018, and since then we've put out nearly $8 million in funding to partners and various organizations to provide services to the agricultural community. And in the last 2 years alone, these funds have helped support, just in the last 2 years, over 400 events and provided nearly 1,000 hours of educational opportunities for farmers, as well as providing nearly 2,000 farm visits and technical assistance visits. So there really is a huge volume of work that occurs through these grant funds, and we're really looking forward to and excited about what you all are interested in proposing and the work that's ahead. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and I'm literally going to be walking through the request for proposals. So it might seem a little dry, but please, if any of you have questions, please feel free to, again, raise your hand or drop a question in the chat, and we'll answer them the best that we can. Okay. Get to my screen share here. This is going to be the easiest. Whoops. Bear with me while I navigate my windows. Here we go. Okay. I meant to add this disclaimer in the beginning of the informational webinar, but I do have 2 small children home today, and I assure you that they are being taken care of by someone else. But if you hear any commotions or some type of background noise, it's just my very rambunctious children in the background. But hopefully they're well entertained by their dad for the next hour. All right. So everybody should be able to see the RFP, the Vermont, it's titled the AgCWIP program, and we're going to just be walking right through this. And I'm going to be highlighting some of the important pieces of the RFP. Is everybody, I think everybody should be able to see it. And this is available on the website as well. All right, so 2 big pieces that I want to just pull out is that right in the beginning of the RFP, we highlight that we have 2 really big overarching priorities for the scope of work. And one is regulatory compliance and agricultural non-point source pollution reduction. And this is really, the REPs and our regulations are really structured in a way to assist agricultural producers in meeting our state water quality goals. And so that's a really important priority for our agency. And then the second piece is the economic and environmental viability on Vermont farms. I think many of us know that the economic impact that agriculture has for the state is of huge value, but it is a struggle for a lot of farms and the farming community. it's, navigating that space between investing in environmental practices and making those financial investments can be a hard space sometimes. So that's also a really important piece of our intention with these grant funds. All right, so this grant program has 4 main categories of activities. And I'm going to walk through each activity area, and I'll pause after each activity area for questions. I think that might be the best format. So these activity areas are really designed to be very broad and allow space for creativity. So what we're really looking for in these applications is scopes of works that are proposed that you as a local organization or as the technical expert is presenting as a priority for your area. So we're leaning on our applicants as well to really pair together what the state's priorities are and what you're seeing on the ground to bring forward an application that has quantifiable outcomes and a high rate of success. So that's really the overarching goal of why we've left these pretty open-ended for people to have that creative space to bring forward what they see as the agricultural community needs. So this first activity is organizational capacity development, and there's a broad number of activities that are eligible here. It can be used to pay staffing expenses, purchasing software. It's helped funded in the past strategic planning for organizations, board developments and trainings, volunteer and staff training. This is also a space where if your organization wanted to develop some sort of mentorship program or some sort of orientation or training program for new employees, this can provide funding for that, and can also provide funding for administrative and management of specific programs. So if you're, have a program that's really needing that extra person or staff time or personnel time to really invest into it to bring it to a full successful program, this is an area that funding can support that. One important part of all of this, and this actually goes along with all activities, is we really like to see activities pairing well or taking into consideration state planning efforts, such as tactical basin planning, the strategies of the Vermont Agricultural Water Quality Partnership, agricultural work groups. We really like to see applications that take those planning initiatives into consideration, as well as ones that support a lot of collaboration with other partners or other projects and are leveraging each other. So that's definitely something that we look for and think brings a lot of value to applications. The one thing that is new or different in this grant round is in previous grant rounds, we have provided funding for board members or members of a watershed group or a farmers alliance, for example, to attend stakeholder meetings. And these were originally in the activity area of education and outreach, which we'll go through next, but we've moved that type of activity to organizational capacity development. So we also want to value the agricultural community's representation and stakeholder meetings. So any sort of policy making or work groups or initiatives that are set forth by state government, we want to see that agricultural representation. And so we do want to support member involvement and engagement in those type of meetings. So that's something we've put in here and highlighted. So this first paragraph kind of lists off all these things that we'll support. And then the second paragraph, and you'll see this is how it's formatted through the RFP, hones in a little bit more on what we encourage applicants to include. And that really includes, we want all of this organizational capacity to lead to conservation planning, that leads to precision agricultural adoption, that leads to BMP implementation and nutrient management planning. So when we're looking for organizational capacity activities, those activities need to lead to some type of agricultural practice implementation. And again, I just want to highlight again that we do value and encourage applications for supporting that agricultural representation on stakeholder and work group meetings. Another part of organizational capacity development is conservation equipment maintenance. This is something we funded in our last grant round and we will continue to fund. So if your organization has rental equipment, we will accept applications for funding to support the maintenance of that equipment. We all know that you can get the no-till drill or you can get the drag line system, but it needs support and maintenance long-term for it to be a successful program. So just to note, this is only for not-for-profit equipment rental programs. So this is really for rental programs, not individual farm equipment. All right, so are there any questions on the organizational capacity work area? Okay, we will move on to the second activity area. So education and outreach is our second activity area. This is a really big part of our AgCWIP program. As I mentioned in the beginning, it really funds a lot of educational opportunities for farmers, the public, custom manure applicators, and it's a great avenue to, leverage some of those initiatives. So this is eligible activities include any education and outreach type activity really. And as you can see, there's a huge list of audience listed. It's farmers, technical service providers, the public, landowners, students. This also includes peer-to-peer engagement, and it can be in various formats from in-person to virtual events. We all know that virtual events have become really popular in the last couple of years for obvious reasons, and so we want to continue to support that type of avenue. The biggest difference or change between the last grant program and this one is that when it comes to reporting on these activities, which I'll go down to later on when we get to the sort of what comes along with these grant funds, is we're really looking for lead event organizers to be the caretakers of all the information that goes along with an organized event and tracking that information. So in previous grants, whether you participated in an event or led one, everybody tracked that information. And this grant round, what we're going to be encouraging and moving towards is that the lead event organizer will be the keeper of all of the organization information and be responsible for reporting that to us. And the other really big thing that we're going to be strongly encouraging and pushing in the education and outreach activity area is if you are organizing an event, we are prioritizing events that will offer water quality educational credits. So in our required ag practices, certified small farms, medium farms, large farms, custom applicators, and soon to be certified technical service providers will have required educational credit. And so we're really trying to prioritize events and educational opportunities that provide those credits for these groups. We also want to note that we really value any type of education or outreach initiative that really incorporates farmer to farmer peer networking and building that network between farmers and peers. And we also want to make known to applicants that we're really looking for education and events and initiatives that also incorporate some sort of strategy that includes student participation from local schools or technical schools and the non-traditional audience, non-dairy farmers, newer beginning farmers. Anytime that you can highlight or include a strategy that speaks to, how you might go beyond the normal sort of standard audience of a agricultural event, will help elevate your education and outreach application. All right, are there any questions about the education and outreach activity area? Matt Witten, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for holding this, Mary. Hope your kids are happy. When you say students, can you, are you talking about students from, all the way from elementary school up through college, or what kind of students are you kind of referring to there?
Sure, yeah, students in school. So I would say all the way up through college.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, so these water quality educational credits, I don't know how to meet those or offer those. Can you say a little bit about how we would know if we were doing that, or, be part of that?
No, that's a great question. And I see also Lauren Weston put in the chat a very similar question about guidance on what needs to be included in an event for water quality credits. So we do have a water quality credit request process. And so the REPs, the required ag practices, do specify different topic areas that need to be covered in a water quality event. It's pretty broad. Most agricultural events do qualify for credit. And so there is a process online, and I can drop actually, I think it's right on the, oh no, it's not. I can drop the link to the approval form, but there's basically an online portal, and their event providers apply for water quality training credits. So there's a form that you complete, and then the agency reviews it and says, yes, this event is qualified for 3 or 4 credits. 1 credit equals 1 hour of training. And we do request that those forms are submitted 30 days prior to the event. And so what we're changing this year, and it's not quite finalized yet, thank you, Marilia, is, so hold that question. When I get down to the reporting piece and sort of what comes along with getting a grant, I will dig into that a little bit more on what events qualify for water quality credits and what the process is. Okay. And I just saw another question in the chat. Can we propose for funds to support speakers and pay host farmers? Yes, that is a qualifying expense for events. And Hillary, I see your hand is raised. Hillary Solomon.
Hey, Mary, good to talk to you. Yeah, I just may have misunderstood. I just need some clarification on something you just said a couple seconds ago. You said something about TSPs and the different groups that provide services to farms, and then you were talking about these trainings and workshops. So those TSPs would be providing trainings to farmers, but if we provided a training to a TSP on a specific topic, is that something that would also be, like, are you looking at both of those sides of the workshops?
Yes, I think so. And just for everyone's clarification, the technical service provider rule requiring them to certify and requiring them to have educational credits is not yet rule. And so that's future, but yes, there could be opportunity where an event that you're hosting does qualify for all of those population groups could go to that training and receive credit for it.
And then,
So for example, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say one example is custom Manure applicators who are currently required to have educational credit. We have had partners put on events specifically for custom applicators to receive credits, which their scope of educational requirements has really focused a lot more on nutrient and manure application naturally. And so you can tailor events specifically to certain population groups, and that would be supported through these grants.
Thank you.
Okay. I will move on to the next activity area. All right, so the third activity area is technical assistance, and this was also a really popular activity area through these AgCWIP grants. And the real goal at the end of the day for technical assistance is that it's leading to conservation practice planning, design, and implementation. And that could be through for a variety of different project types, from NMP development to agronomic practice implementation to more structural farmstead practices. And this technical assistance could range from providing a farm assistance with grant writing all the way up to implementation oversight. And so it's, again, a very broad category, but it's really intended to support those applying for the grant, to support our service providers in helping the farming community navigate this space of conservation practice planning and implementation. An important piece to the technical assistance portion, if you're applying for this, is we track technical assistance. We require tracking of the technical assistance visits, and we do this through our state's multi-partner agricultural conservation practice tracking database, or also known as the partner database. And so anybody who's applying for this activity area, if you have not yet done training with this database, we will provide that and provide the framework for which those technical assistance visits are tracked. And really, we are really valuing technical assistance that leads to implementation. And we wanted to highlight this time that we understand that there are difficulties sometimes with working with reluctant farmers, but we still value that time that service providers spend with those farms. And so we wanted to highlight that we still value that time. And we also value technical assistance that leverages existing state, federal, and private cost share programs. Are there any questions about the technical assistance category of work? Hillary, is your hand up again, or is that from the previous question?
Sorry, I just forgot to lower it.
No worries, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to the next activity area. So the last activity area is conservation practice surveys. This is something that was new in our 2020 grants. And this activity area is really important for accounting for agricultural practices that are occurring without any state or federal cost share. And the way that this has worked previously in the last couple of years is that grantees conduct a practice survey with farms. They work with farms and interview them to understand what practices they have implemented without state or federal cost share. And they also may account for NRCS or federally funded practices, but I'm not going to get too into the weeds on it. The overarching idea here is that through state and federal cost share programs, we are able to collect practice information and then assign phosphorus reductions to it and then account for it in our clean water performance reporting, which is to meet our overall state water quality goals. But the gap there is that we don't know all the other practices that are going on. And so this is an opportunity to fill that gap and help give the agricultural community more credits towards meeting water quality goals. Similar to the technical assistance activity work, this work does also require using the partner database. And so there would be training associated with the partner database to conduct this type of work. Any questions about the conservation practice surveys? All right. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit more of the details on what your application needs and just some tips on, creating a robust and quality application. And I definitely recommend everybody to read through the request for proposals pretty thoroughly because there's a lot of language in there. So performance requirements. So if your application is ranked and the agency decides to fund your proposal, there are performance requirements associated. And what that means is you need to report the outputs and outcomes of the work that you're doing. In the past, we have provided a list of outputs and grantees have selected which ones that they are going to track and report on. And what happened is we had 68 different tracking measures amongst all of our AgCWIP grants. And so what myself, Nina, Marilia, a couple other coworkers did is we went through those tracking measures, those outputs, and we selected 3 to 5 performance measures for each activity area. And we are requiring these outputs per activity area instead of it being more open-ended. And this is an attempt to slim it down, get the information that we need because we actually report many of these outputs up to the state's clean water program. And so this is an attempt to slim down that list and streamline it a little bit. So any grant agreement needs to have these performance measures in them. So when you're working on your proposal and you're thinking about your activity areas, we're going to be asking you what your goals are for each activity area in the view of these outputs and outcomes. And the way that these will be reported is we will have reporting templates and we will provide all that reporting guidance to you. So there will be a reporting template that you use and you will submit those semi-annually and then there'll be a final report. So please take a look at this. I'll give an example. So if your proposal includes funding for a staff person who's going to deploy your programs or provide administrative support, whatever that staff person is going to do, we're going to be asking you what the number of FTE stands for full-time employees supported by the AgCWIP grant. Okay. And as you can see down the list, there's several different measures. So for example, if you're doing events for education and outreach, we're going to ask you how many events did you organize? How many attendees came to your event? How many of your attendees indicated they had an improved understanding because of your event? So those are the type of outputs that we're looking for in reporting. And we want to see these included in your proposal so we have an understanding of what your activities are intended to accomplish. Many of these, and the one other note I'll make is a lot of these we actually will be tracking through the partner database. So for example, in technical assistance realm, it asks for number of unique farms assisted, number of visits. We as an agency can pull that information from our partner database, and we're working on modifying our reporting process to create some efficiencies there, because in previous grants the grantees tracked it and then we've tracked it, and so we're trying to create some efficiencies where there's not as much double work going on. All right, are there any questions about the reporting requirements or the requirements for what you have to track? Okay. All right, so the proposal format. So when you're thinking about your proposal and you're putting it together, we do have a template, an application template, which we strongly encourage you to use. It's not required, but it's strongly encouraged to use the application template. There's also, in the RFP, attachment A is a logic model, or that's attachment B. The logic model is not required, so you do not have to submit it with your application, but it is a really useful tool if you're trying to figure out what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and what the outcomes are going to be of it, and how it matches up with some of the priorities discussed above. So the logic model can be a really good exercise to go through for your organization if you're trying to hone in what your application is going to include. The proposal should include your project team, so who is going to be working on the proposed scope of work, what their role is, what percentage of time they're going to be spending with the program, and the experience, any previous experience they might have. The scope of work is the heart of your application. It needs to be pretty detailed, describing what tasks you're going to be undertaking, how you'll approach the tasks, and what the outcomes are going to be, which are listed above, and how you're going to measure those outcomes. In your scope of work, you also need to include how this work is going to benefit water quality and soil health. That's a really big piece. You got to tie all of your work back to those priorities. We are asking this time, if you are applying for organizational capacity, to please include a chart of the positions that are going to be supported through any organizational capacity funding and their associated responsibilities, so we can visually see who and what they're working on under AgCWIP. We really wanted to note that these grants, you can apply for up to 4 years. If you apply for a 4-year grant, likely somewhere around the 2-year mark, we're going to probably want to just sit down and evaluate the work plan, make sure everything looks good still for the next 2 years. And the reason why we're doing this is because a lot changes in 2 years. I think we're all pretty familiar with, staffs might change, state priorities might change, there might be new initiatives. And so with anyone applying for a 4-year grant, there would likely be some sort of interim evaluation and review of the work plan. The budget is also a really big piece of the application, so make sure that you really provide a detailed explanation of what you're proposing and the funds associated with it. So there is an example table, which I'll scroll down to in a minute, but this budget, because the AgCWIP program can host a lot of different activities within the activity areas, it can get you start getting really built out. And so what we're recommending that you do is provide a budget of the activity area. So if you're doing organizational capacity, provide your total budget and then break it out by year. Now, your organizational capacity area might contain, you might be doing conservation and equipment maintenance, you might be doing events, you might be developing a website resource. Those 3 things, we still want you to detail in the narrative portion of your budget description. So you have your budget table that covers the big picture, this is what it costs. And then in your budget narrative, we want you to go into detail about what you will be doing in that organizational capacity area as an example. And I'll get to questions once I'm done through the what needs to be in the application. So geographic area, this has also changed. So previously we had very detailed prioritized sub-watersheds. We have pulled that back out. There's still prioritization for Lake Champlain, but the second tier of it is that we are going to ask you in your application to include a description and justification for geographic needs and priorities. And so what that means is we want to see, no matter what watershed you're in, what is your geographic need and how have you prioritized that? Is it identified in a basin plan? Is it identified in the TMDL? Is it an organizational part of your organizational strategic plan? We want to see some sort of linkage on how you came to prioritize that project. And then the last piece of the application is the certificate of compliance, which is in Appendix D. So I covered a lot there with the budget, geographic areas. So are there any questions regarding the budget or any of those pieces we just went over? I see Allison has her hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. My question has to do with how we should consider the cost of staffing. So in extension, we can expect that the majority of our staffing costs would be going towards education and outreach or the technical assistance provision. But I noticed that staffing costs were specifically listed under organizational capacity development. And so I was wondering if you expect all personnel costs to be accounted for under organizational capacity development, or if they're in service of the education outreach or TA, should they be counted in those activity areas?
I think that they should be accounted for in the area that they are working in. So if you're hiring someone new, that's the area to explain that is in the organizational capacity development. But okay, I kind of see where there might be a little bit of mix up there. But then the funding and the budgeting is occurring in the technical assistance category. So I think that there's some flexibility in how you want to present that. If you want to present that all in the organizational capacity development and then put it in the organizational capacity budget, I think that that's okay. And then if you wanted to do it in the technical assistance, either or, I think we would accept. So it's really a matter of, if your person is going to be working on all activity areas, I would probably recommend you submit it under organizational capacity development, just so that it's more holistic and together. I see there's a question in the chat. We might need clarification around what implementation of a new practice looks like. So this was a great question. We do have a guidance document that we've started for tracking those specific measures and what those mean. And so I can, yes, there will definitely be guidance and clarification around that. And it's almost done. The reporting guidance documents are almost done. So we are hoping to share that with folks. I just wasn't quite ready for this meeting. I see another question, funding question, is the $3 million total funds available for 2 years or for 4 years? Great question. That $3 million is secured for the next 2 years. So the way state budgeting works is it's on a fiscal year basis. And so it gets a little funky when we start doing long-term planning. But the anticipation is that, we would receive additional funding, for those additional 2 years. Are there any other questions regarding? Hillary, I see your hands raised.
Sorry, I have lots of questions. So in looking at your you know, the way we're kind of evaluating our success, I didn't see the types of questions that we had in our last or current reporting format, which is like, you know, there's a lot of quality, there were quality sort of questions. Are those going to be incorporated, or did you guys, like, were those were challenging for us to answer? I don't know if those were challenging for you to review as well. I guess I was just curious if that'll be part of it or.
Nope. So that list that you see in the RFP is the list that we're going to be working off of. If you have other measures that you want to propose, we are happy to see those. But you are right. We had a lot of struggle getting those quality measures from folks. I think I mentioned we had 68 different reporting measures that people could choose from, and almost all of the ones that were along the lines of behavior or social change just were really difficult to gather. And they are important. I mean, anybody who's gone through results-based accountability training or, you know, measuring success and program development, we know that those quality measures are really important, but they're often the most difficult. So if you have an idea and have a way to track those and want to include them in your report, we completely welcome those, but it was something that didn't work out well as a requirement. Tim Davis, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could go back over the timing of that state budgeting with it's a $3 million 3-year.
So the $3 million is what is available now for us to release. And so that $3 million can fund 2-year and 4-year grants. We expect, and none of this is guaranteed, that we will receive additional funding, you know, year after year after year for AgCWIP. So the reason why the press release says $3 million is because that's what we have in hand. That's what's in our budget currently. But the expectation is that we will be able to, you know, continue this grant funding round for who knows how long. And so what we wanted to do was open up the applications to 2 to 4 years, because what it does is it allows people to do a little bit more further long-term strategic planning. And so we work that out sort of on our end and see what comes in for applications, and then comfortably develop the agreements and the budgeting to fit with the budget cycles. It's a little confusing, but that's the best answer I can give right now without overcommitting anything. All right, I see Allison, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I have another question related to evaluation and reporting. On page 13 of the RFP, this is in the application template. There is a table, and I think that this is what one of the previous question askers was referring to, about quantity and quality of effort and effect. And it wasn't clear to us when we were reviewing this whether this needs to be completed for every activity area or whether this is only for the additional activities because you haven't already identified performance measures associated with them.
Yep, so that quadrant, it probably looks familiar to a lot of you because that's how our grants have been structured for the last 2 or 4 years. That is not required anymore unless you're proposing additional activities that do not have associated measures identified above. So education outreach, technical assistance, conservation practice surveys, organizational capacity development, we have predefined those measures in the above table. And I think many of you have noticed that we've really moved to a lot of quantitative reporting again. And part of that is because a lot of these are what we report to the state's clean water program, which is what is included in the clean water investment report. And so we have to include those. And the other part too is the quality of the data we were receiving from previous grants was not, it was good, but it wasn't necessarily a good picture of all the work that you were doing. I do highly encourage, even though this might be only what we're requiring, I do strongly encourage that organizations really consider those. Let me get back to that chart down here. those how well did you do it and what is the quality of impact questions, because those can really go a long way in developing and improving your programs. Okay, Tim, did you have another question, or is your hand still raised from the last one?
It's just still up for.
Okay. Oh, you broke up a little bit. I'm going to move to Heather, who also has her hand raised.
Good morning, Mary. In the past, we've paid changed. Is that something that we can consider in this round? The other question that I wanted to ask was, I noticed under technical assistance, we can do soil manure sampling. Are we able to include the cost of those for the farmers, or is that just for our time in taking the soil and manure samples? And also specifically, our tactical basin plan is focused on nitrogen reduction. And as you know, we've had our nitrogen program in place, and it's something that we wish to continue. And so I didn't know if that would be a possibility.
So to answer your second question, we would prioritize funding of the staff time over funding of the actual soil and manure samples. That probably falls a little bit lower on the priority list as far as funding goes. For your third question about the nitrogen, that's where that geographic scope area of the application comes in. So we've added this year that in your application, if you can provide justification for your geographic need, that will be taken into consideration. So I think that's a great example, Heather, of, you know, you're over in the Connecticut and there's a real justified need for understanding and developing practices specifically targeting nitrogen, which is what the TMDL is for on the Connecticut. So that's a great example of your geographic need in relation to water quality. I missed your first question. You cut out for a second. So could you repeat that?
We've typically paid for Go Crop subsidization in the past, and I didn't know if that would be a possibility.
I think it's an eligible expense, and what
not.
it comes to is what you want to, as an organization, want to prioritize for the funding.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Great questions. So we only have a few more minutes. If you're able to stay on a little longer, we might run a little over, but I'll try to be conscious of time. That was really the bulk of the RFP. And I just wanted to, sorry, I might be making people dizzy scrolling up and down really quickly, but I just wanted to go over quickly the timeline for the grant. So the application due date is January 31st, and the goal is that we're going to review all applications by March 1st. And so the goal is to have at least an award or notification to those we will be awarding funds to by March 1st. This doesn't mean you'll have a grant agreement in place. It just means that that's when we start discussing and formalizing your work plan, the budget, and so forth, which does often take coordination and collaboration and a lot of communication. So the goal is that the agreements themselves will be executed in May. So we're hoping for notifications to be out to folks by March 1st, and then spend those next 2 months on really nailing down the work plan and developing the agreements. And I didn't get in full to the reporting, but if you're are awarded, we certainly will have a report training there's a guidance document that we've been working on. There's templates that you will use. We're trying to make it as streamlined as possible, just because there is data that we require through these grants, and it's very similar across all grants. So we're trying to refine the templates a bit further. And I said I was going to get back to the question about the water quality credit. So Marilia put the link in the chat. So what we're planning on doing this grant round is, so in previous grants, those who were doing events had to put in all their event information into the reporting template. What we're planning on doing this round, and we're putting the finishing touches on it, is the lead event organizer is actually going to submit their event credit approval form through an online form, and that's going to collect the majority of your event information. And so when it comes to reporting for AgCWIP, that event sheet that is reported in is really slimmed down, and there's only about 5 or 6 pieces of information that you'll need to report, because we will already have a lot of that event information from your credit request form. So you'll submit the credit request form and it'll get approved. And then at the end of your event, you'll essentially report to us the number of attendees and then your quality measures, percent of attendees indicated improved understanding and those type of things. All right, so this is time for any additional questions. I'm happy to stay on as long as people would like to answer questions. And as of course, if you do have to hop off and you have questions or you want to work through your proposals, please don't hesitate to call me. We can talk through it on the phone. All right, Matt, I see your hand is raised.
Thanks, Mary. It's just occurring to me, our organization will likely be on a Basin Water Quality Council for Otter Creek. And then if this grant if we receive a AgCWIP grant, it's going to be sort of a leap upward in the amount of grant tracking and project tracking and reporting. And I'm just wondering if under organizational capacity development, if we want to hire an administrative assistant to kind of help track these various planning and implementation grants, if that's too circular to be applying for, or if that makes sense.
So our grants have funded administrative positions to assist with planning, coordination, and all that background stuff that needs to happen to get these grants off the ground. So it could be an eligible activity. Any other questions or thoughts? Oh, Allison, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I have a lot of questions today. You're asking for the budget to be broken out by activity area, and we were wondering whether there's an expectation that reporting will need to happen by activity area. Just based on the way UVM does budgeting, it'd be pretty hard for us to do at the reporting phase, though we're certainly willing to do it in the proposal phase if that's a requirement.
So that is a good clarification that I didn't talk about. In the reporting and invoicing, it will be based off deliverables. So it'll be based off your report submission and acceptance. And so in those reports, we're not going to ask for expenditure by activity area. We're really looking for those outputs by activity area. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think in the end, like up front, we want to know how the budget is broken out and sort of what percentage of budget and staff time is going to each activity area. But when it comes to the reporting, we're really focusing on those outputs and outcomes. Did you have another question, Allison, or? Okay. Okay, well, as you all are working through this RFP and putting your proposals together, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. Marily and I are going to be working on a question and answer document that will add to the website for you to reference, and we'll include the questions that were asked today. And we look forward to seeing everyone's applications and what you bring forward. All right. Thanks, everyone.
There's one more question,
Have a great
Mary.
day. Oh, sorry.
Hillary asks if there's a benefit in terms of applying application scoring to applying as a larger group or a penalty for applying individually.
There's no penalty for applying individually, and as far as applying as a larger group, we like to see collaboration, but it's really up to the grantee on how they want to organize and frame their applications, but there's no penalties for applying individually. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I hope you have a great Wednesday. Bye.